What's really happened before and during the shadow experiments? Many of us have probably wondered about this at some point, because even though it's a key part leading up to the event of Persona 3, the main story really did not say much about it. In today's videos, I'll explain what happened during and before the shadow experiment. To do this, we'll be looking at the old documents and the fragmentary memoir left by the Kirijo group. That said, some of the information in them is unclear and need extra knowledge to fully understand, so I'll help connect the dot when needed. We'll start with the old documents found on many of the blocks floor in Tartarus. The power supply expansion has been completed. What unusual is the excess wattage? Why would an island with only a school on it need so much power? Kirijo's Ergo research lab is setting up a facility on this island. It doesn't make any sense. Even a rank and file researcher like me can tell what is about to take place on this island. A news institution will launch on the island. The amount of money being poured into it is unheard of. I have been told to be part of it. I'm worried. I have a bad feeling about this project. These three documents date back to before the shadow experiment begins, so let me take you all the way back. Before 1995, Mitsuru's grandfather, Koetsu Kirijo, came into possession of strange objects called the plume of dust. These plumes were parts of Nyx that separate from hers when she first arrived on Earth billions of years ago. The research on the plume of dust led to discoveries of shadows. Further research revealed that shadow could manipulate time and space. Additionally, the Kirijo group learned about a prophecy from an ancient civilization about an event called the Fall. For now, the important thing to know about the prophecy is that the Kirijo group interpreted it to mean that the prophecy would be fulfilled when the shadows were gathered. This led to the construction of the new lab on Tasami Port Islands to provide space for containing and experimenting on the shadows. Now, before we move on, there's an interesting detail I like to discuss in the document 01. It's mentioned why would an island with only a school on it need so much power? The issue here is that the major plot point of the games is that the Kirijo group built Gekkoukan High on top of the shadow experiment lab to cover up the incident. So, how could there have already been a school there before the incident even took place? Interestingly, there are small discussion about this topic among a small group of fans on the internet. However, they are not able to come up with a conclusive answer. That said, it is likely not a mistake by the writer, as Yukari also mentioned the same information during the cutscene where she confronted Mitsuru about the incident.
There was an explosion near our school and a lot of people died. It must have been big news back then.
So, while it doesn't change the main narrative significantly, we can assure that there was already a school on the island and the Kirijo group built a lab on or very close to the school ground. After the accident, they then built a new building for the school to cover up the incident. The head researcher came to try and convince me. I was surprised. He was my own mentor. Whenever I remember his timid smile, my resolve wavers. I think this part is mostly self-explanatory, but I'm sure many of you are wondering who the head researcher is. The answer is Ishiro Takeba, or Yukari fathers. We know this from the letter Ishiro sent to Yukari. In the letters, Ishiro told Yukari that he just got appointed to a head researcher by Koetsu Kirijo.
I'm really proud of myself. Kirijo-san appointed me head researcher. I'll be starting on a big project soon. It feels good to receive so much recognition for my work. But I swear to you, nothing is more important to me than you and your mother.
Now, if you're someone who gets lost in the narrative of video games and enjoy these kind of explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification for more interesting detail about Persona series and other Atlus games. Alright, let's move on. There's still a lot that the documents will reveal, including who wrote them, which honestly might surprise you. I hope to stay by his side, so I foolishly agreed to participate in the project. But the research was unbelievable. Should we really be experimenting on these shadows? So, I was right after all. This shadow didn't just come from anywhere. They're born from humans themselves. If my theory is correct, collecting shadow would mean they told us everything. This project is pure evil. But we have a single hope. The power to control one's own shadow born from within. This could be our salvation. I have decided to leave the institution. I refuse to be involved in any crimes. The head researcher decided not to come with me. Maybe I'll open a store with my collection of antiques. These 4 documents show that the author started to have suspicions about the experiment and discovered that the shadow are born from humans themselves. However, they are only partially correct, because the shadow is actually created when Nick's psyche mixing with the psyche of a life form over a billion years ago. This then results in all humans having shadows inside them. The goal of the shadows, whether large or small, is the same, is to return to Nick's. The issue is that the shadow have been part of human psyche for a long time. When they leave, it's like a part of our psyche is missing too, which result in people becoming the lost. This is what the document 06 mean when it say, but we have a single hope, the power to control one's own shadow born from within. People who can control their shadow to a high degree of course can turn them into a persona. I have covered this subject about arrival of Nyx and the creation of shadow in another video, which I will link at the end of this one for those who want to learn more. The contents of document 07 and 08 not only review the identity of author to be the antique shop owner in the Polony Mall, they also added in more detail to what was told to us by Michiru's father, Takeharu, during the summer vacation. Takeharu told us that Michiru's grandfather is slowly losing himself as he's doing more research on the shadows, and eventually he becomes a nihilist. That said, if we look back at the earlier document, it is clear that there is still a structure of an organization, as the goal of the shadow experiment was to classify among the higher and those that involved directly. But from the sound of it, all that is gone now, as everyone directly involved have gone insane and are truly working towards summoning Nyx. Well, all except one.
I can only hope that this recording reaches someone with a conscience. My employer has become obsessed with a loathsome idea. This experiment should never have been conceived. That's why I had to do something to put a stop to it. However, in doing so, I released a number of shadows that are certain to torment future generations. But I didn't have a choice. If I didn't do this, it could have destroyed the entire world.
The old document gives us insight into the shadow experiment from a perspective of the antique shop owner, or more accurately, a lower level employee of the Kirijo group. Next, we'll discuss the Fragmentary memoir, which is written from the perspective of an executive level member of the group. There's still much more to learn, especially about the origins of the motive of many important characters. A being interfere with time and space, named a shadow. We research a time manipulate device with power. My grandchild, Michiru, come to mind, and what will become of the Kirijo group once I die. Compared to the old documents, the memoir revealed immediately that it was written by Michiru's grandfather, Koetsu Kirijo, likely around the time they first discovered a shadow. This part of the record also shows us that Koetsu's original intention was to build a time manipulation machine that can prevent unwanted events from happening. It was only later that Kirijo group discovered the prophecy about Nyx that everything changed. That said, the game seemed to portray Koetsu as a strict, crazy businessman. Some wiki even classify him as a villain. However, here you can see that he seems much more normal as he thinks about his granddaughters and his legacy. Even shadow have unique traits. The more hostile ones display great strength, but can't be controlled in our current facility. We develop a cathedral of time to avoid disposal of such unique specimen. I'm sure the biggest question on everyone's mind right now is, what is the Cathedral of Time? And if you play both the base game and the episode Ikis, you'll realize there is no place called the Cathedral of Times. A Google search will also not yield any official result, just a few people who have delved deep into the game dictionary speculating among themselves about what it is or where it really is. However, I think I know the answer, and I'll share with you all the conclusion I came up with. The most popular theory I've come across is that it's supposed to link to the Abyss of Time, the dungeon name from the episode I guessed. But honestly, apart from the name similarities, there isn't much to go on, so I started thinking about it myself. Usually when it's come to this kind of cryptic element like the old documents, all the answers are already there but are named or spoken about in a different way. Even shadow have unique traits. The more hostile one display great strength, but I can't control in our current facility. We'll develop the Cathedral of Time to avoid disposal of such unique specimen, suggested that the Cathedral of Time have to be filled with strong shadow, so the next logical place I considered is Tartarus. You might remember that Tartarus was supposedly created by accident from the explosion of the shadow experiment. However, if you recall a bit more, Ikutsuki, who was part of the team at that time, told us that while the accident did happen, Tartarus was not created as a result of it.
The experiment did go awry, but that wasn't the reason the Dark Hour and Tartarus came to be. They manifested as a result of harvesting the Shadow's power, just as the experiment was designed to do.
This means that the Kirijo group created or summoned Tartarus on purpose. Furthermore, Tartarus did have floor that contained a strong shadow guarding the stair leading to the next floor. But the issue with this theory is that there are many other shadows, both strong and weak, throughout Tartarus. However, you could argue that initially only a strong shadow was placed there, but after the accident, all the shadow that Kirijo held within the lab scattered around there. But the final nail in the coffin for this idea is that the official book released by Atlas called Persona 3 Club Book stated that the tower was created by the gatherings of the shadow. This means that despite the Tartarus being the result of the shadow experiment, the Kirijo group had no direct involvement in creating it. It's more just like they summoned it, if that makes sense. That said, my final interpretation, which I think is the most likely, is the monad door and the passage. This area is occupied only by strong shadow and is where you find all the fragment memoirs. Additionally, the fragments are addition to the reload versions, as are the monad passage and doors. To be more precise, the monad floor was already present in the original version of Persona 3, but it's had a complete different mechanic and did not contain fragments memoirs. So, my conclusion for this part is that the Kirijo group was able to develop some sort of time-space pocket from the shadow experiments, which led to the creation of the monad space. Now, there's still more memoir that need to be covered, and it actually will explain a lot about the character motive, especially that of Koetsu and Ikutsuki. The true nature of the shadow has come to light, in line with excavated historical documents. Their origin will bring the world to its ends. This has become rapidly apparent. The project should be stopped, but it may have already been. The fog has lifted. I had no reason to waver in the first place. The world will be saved by the King of Destruction. He who gathered the shadow shall be the one to rule. Let us call him the Prince. One of the researchers has begun to realize the secret of the shadows. His interpretation of the documents is arbitrary and biased. As expected from another lowly human, I believe his name was Ikutsuki. The first two documents mark the point where Koetsu went insane. However, you can see some concern in him in Memoir 04, as he considered calling off the experiment. But by the next memoir, it's clear that Koetsu, who was thinking about his granddaughters and his legacy, is no longer present. He was even convinced that there was never any reason to worry or overthinking any of it from the start.
Unfortunately, under my father's direction, the research began to stray from its original goal. In his later years, my father seemed to have only nihilism in his heart.
Memoir 05 revealed that Ikutsuki, who was working under the Kirijo group at that time, has a different interpretation of the prophecy. To simply put it, Koetsu did not believe that a human was supposed to fill the role of the prince, but Ikutsuki did. Moreover, he believed he was the prince himself. This information is shared with Cease during his betrayal.
Humanity has overrun this world, turning it into a barren void in the process. The only hope of salvation lies in ruin. According to the prophecy, the fall will be orchestrated by a prince. And once he has delivered us all, he shall rule the new world as king. The attempt years ago failed, but the time has come at last. I am that prince.
But how can we be sure that Koetsu had the right interpretation of the prophecy before he died? Well, let's read the last part. The time has come. Tomorrow, the Prince of Salvation will be born. I shall leave my pen and document in this sealed cathedral, which will become a land of eternities once the shadows effect reach their peak. That said, I think you know what happened next.